Somewhere in a cave in Morocco, buried with a group of people who died roughly 15,000 years ago, archaeologists found something unexpected alongside the bones and stone tools: seeds, hundreds of them, from a plant called ephedra, a natural stimulant containing compounds so potent that modern athletes are banned from using its synthetic derivatives in competition. They weren't eating it. They weren't growing it. The concentration was deliberate, the placement intentional. Someone put it there on purpose. This is not an isolated find. Across 6 continents, in sites spanning tens of thousands of years, archaeologists keep finding the same thing: psychoactive plants, stimulants, hallucinogens, narcotics, placed with the dead, stored in ritual containers, depicted in cave art, detected in the hair of ancient remains. The question is not whether ancient humans used mind-altering substances. The evidence has answered that. The question is why, and the answer is more interesting, more complicated, and more relevant to your life right now than the version you've probably heard. To understand why ancient humans altered their consciousness and what it actually tells us about the human brain, we need to untangle 5 things: what the archaeological evidence actually shows and where it was found, why the getting high before hunting story is mostly wrong, what ancient people were actually using these substances for, why the human brain appears to be uniquely built for altered states, and what this means for the way modern people seek out the same thing today. Let's go. Here's what the archaeology actually shows and what it doesn't. The most consistent finding across ancient sites is this: psychoactive substances appear overwhelmingly in ritual contexts: burial sites, ceremonial chambers, shamanic toolkits, artistic depictions associated with spiritual figures. The 1,000-year-old ritual bundle from the Bolivian Andes, containing traces of at least 5 psychoactive compounds, including cocaine derivatives and harmine, was found in a shaman's pouch, not a hunter's pack. The ephedra seeds in Morocco were in a burial pit. The cannabis seeds in Romania were in ceremonial bowls. The opium poppy fragments in a Neolithic Spanish grave were in the teeth of a male adult buried with ritual objects. The pattern is consistent enough to be a signal. Ancient use of psychoactive plants was primarily ritual, not recreational, and was almost certainly not routine pre-hunt fuel. So where did the hunting story come from? And what were they actually doing? The hunting story has a kernel of real evidence underneath it. It just gets simplified past the point of accuracy. There are documented cases of hunter-gatherer groups using stimulant plants in contexts that included hunting preparation. Ephedra, whose active compound ephedrine is a potent stimulant that suppresses hunger, increases alertness, raises heart rate, and blunts the perception of pain, was used by various cultures across Eurasia and the Americas in ways that would have been practically useful for extended physical exertion. Tobacco, which contains nicotine, was used by indigenous North American groups as a stimulant that suppresses appetite and increases focus. Coca leaves, chewed by Andean peoples for centuries and documented long before Spanish contact, reduce altitude-related fatigue and suppress hunger on long journeys through high mountain terrain. These uses are real. What they are not is the full picture, or even the dominant one. The dominant pattern in the archaeological record is shamanic and ritual use, not performance enhancement. And to understand why, you have to understand what shamanism actually is and why it would have been one of the most important social technologies an early human group possessed. A shaman, in the anthropological sense, is a specialist in altered states. Someone who deliberately enters a non-ordinary state of consciousness to perform specific functions for the group. Diagnosing illness, mediating conflict. Tracking game through means the community understood as spiritual communication, maintaining the group's relationship with the natural and supernatural world as they conceived it. In small hunter-gatherer groups with no other specialists, the shaman was doctor, psychologist, judge, and priest in one person. The substances that reliably produced altered states, psilocybin mushrooms, peyote, ayahuasca, datura, concentrated ephedra, were the tools of that specialization. Using them required preparation, supervision, and specific ritual context. They were not casually consumed any more than modern surgical tools are casually used. They were deployed intentionally in controlled settings by people who knew how to work with them. Somewhere in a Paleolithic camp, the shaman was the one person everyone agreed you did not want improvising. What the archaeological record is showing us, across 6 continents and tens of thousands of years, is not a species that got high for fun before going to catch things. It's a species that recognized, very early, that consciousness could be deliberately altered, and built entire social institutions around managing, directing, and making use of that alteration. That's a very different story. And it points at something strange about the human brain. Here's what makes humans genuinely unusual in this domain. The desire to alter consciousness appears to be close to universal across human cultures. Anthropologist Weston LaBarre identified ritual use of psychoactive substances on every inhabited continent. Researcher Andrew Weil argued in the 1970s that the drive to alter consciousness is a fundamental human appetite, as basic and as cross-cultural as the drives to eat and sleep. Every known human civilization has developed some form of mind-altering substance: fermented beverages, stimulant plants, narcotics, or hallucinogens. No other species institutionalizes this. Elephants and chimpanzees have been documented eating fermented fruit. But no other animal builds cultural systems, rituals, specialists, rules, preparation protocols, around the deliberate alteration of consciousness. The behavior is old. The institutionalization of it is distinctly human. So why would the brain want this? The most compelling answer comes from what altered states actually do to the brain, and what problems they were solving. Start with what psilocybin and other classic hallucinogens do neurologically. Research from the last 2 decades, including landmark work at Johns Hopkins, Imperial College London, and NYU, has found that these substances do something specific and unusual. They temporarily reduce the activity of what's called the default mode network. The default mode network is the brain system most active when you're not focused on anything external, when you're ruminating, replaying the past, worrying about the future, maintaining the ongoing narrative of who you are and what you believe. It's the system responsible for your sense of self, your habitual thought patterns, and the mental ruts that are genuinely difficult to escape during ordinary consciousness. Reducing its activity doesn't erase thinking. It changes the structure of thinking, allowing associations between mental regions that don't normally communicate, loosening the grip of habitual patterns, making the mind temporarily more flexible and less constrained by its own prior conclusions. For a small group of humans trying to navigate a genuinely unpredictable and dangerous world, where novel problem-solving could be the difference between survival and not, this capacity for radical mental flexibility wasn't an indulgence. It may have been a strategic asset. There's a more grounded version of the same argument. Stimulant plants like ephedra and tobacco affect the body in ways that are practically useful beyond simple performance. They reduce the perception of pain, suppress hunger signals, and increase the kind of focused alertness that sustained tracking and endurance hunting require. Using them before or during an extended hunt is not irrational. It's applied pharmacology with available materials, and the ritual context matters here too. Shared ritual, a group doing the same thing in the same way, at the same time, with the same intention, is one of the most powerful social bonding mechanisms humans possess. Groups that hunted together, prepared together, ritually invoked success together, and shared the aftermath together were groups with stronger coordination, higher trust, and better collective performance than groups that didn't. The substance was part of the ritual. The ritual was part of the social technology. The social technology made the group more effective. At every step, the thing that looks like getting high was embedded in a system that served practical survival functions. The modern version of this is sitting in plain sight. The beer after work, the coffee before the meeting, the glass of wine that marks the end of the day, the communal meal before the important decision. Humans are still doing the same thing. using mild psychoactive substances to mark transitions, bond groups, and manage the cognitive and emotional demands of coordinated life. The substances changed. The function didn't. The main difference between a prehistoric shamanic ceremony and a modern team happy hour is that one of them involves significantly better mushrooms. Step back, and the question inverts completely. The real question was never, why did ancient humans get high before hunting? That framing makes the behavior seem impulsive, reckless, or naive, something primitive people did before they knew better. What the evidence actually shows is a species that, very early in its history, discovered that consciousness was malleable, that it could be deliberately shifted, and that shifting it in specific ways and specific contexts produced outcomes worth producing. Greater group cohesion, reduced pain in physically demanding situations, access to mental states that were otherwise inaccessible, and a category of specialist the shaman who managed this technology on behalf of the group. That's not primitive. That's sophisticated. It's the same basic insight that drives the entire modern field of pharmacology, the same impulse that fills coffee shops every morning and therapy waiting rooms every week. Humans have always known that the brain is not fixed, that its state can be managed, directed, and deliberately altered. Ancient people didn't stumble onto that insight. They built institutions around it, tens of thousands of years ago. Here's the one thing. The next time you reach for something to shift your mental state, coffee, alcohol, the run you take when you're overwhelmed, the music you put on to focus, notice what you're doing. You are doing what humans have always done, deliberately managing your own consciousness, choosing a substance or a practice that changes how your brain is operating, because the state it's in isn't quite right for what you need right now. The only difference between you and the Paleolithic shaman is that you're doing it alone, without a ritual, without a community, and mostly without thinking about why. The next time you reach for whatever your version of it is, ask why. What state are you actually trying to reach? What are you trying to process, access, or escape? Because ancient humans knew the answer to that question before they took anything. The intention came first. The substance was just the tool. And if it surprises you that ancient humans were running sophisticated systems for managing consciousness tens of thousands of years ago, wait until you hear what those same ancient humans were doing in the dark, around the fire, after the hunt was done. What ancient humans actually did at night and why your brain still craves it. That one's next.